Okay, have you had all the buttons? Have you pressed OK? Here we are. Thursdays at 11 o'clock is QT Conversations. It is Qualified Tutors podcast, our answer to all the questions in tutoring. Well, actually, no, I'm lying. It's no answers at all. It's just more exploration, isn't it? What do we do in these conversations? We explore together, we share, we're really open, we're curious, we're generous, we're reflective. Those are the QT house rules. We've got two new members here today, Holly and Zara. Zara actually told me that she found us through the QT conversations in YouTube, which is really awesome. And she still wanted to join. So Jenna, behave yourself. What am I hoping to talk about today? Something about the personal experiences. Generous, I like that a lot. We're going to be talking about the formative experiences in becoming a professional tutor. So the moments when you felt like you were stretched and you leveled up and you leveled up and you leveled up until you really felt that you were established as a professional tutor. Now, I'm really mindful that we've got some new people in the room and I don't know where they're up to in their tutoring journey. So what I'm going to do initially, and this is how I always do it, is we just open the question initially and then we see what threads come up and we start pulling on them. So Dee, I'm gonna ask you, because you're the OG in the room, to tell
OG?
the old girl,
Oh,
the old girl,
oh,
right?
I'm
Old.
official. I am officially a pensioner. Teachers' pensions have
I didn't
finally
mean
popped
old in
up.
that sense.
Original.
Original, thank you, much better than old. Thank you, the OGs. Okay, so since you are have been one of our longest standing members, please will you start off by talking about that journey of going from plan B to plan A tutoring, which is a phrase that we talk about in the book. Okay, let's go.
Which is awesome. If you don't have it, buy it,
Thank you.
and more importantly, read it.
And then write a review about it.
Yeah, even more important. Gosh, yeah,
Did it come
uh,
with you? That's young. Thank you.
I she's got. Was that a Matt Parker book there as well?
Oh, you are a nerd. Humble
Oh,
beginning.
and I need Matt's Love Triangle book as well, which he wrote
Someone
last
told
year.
me
I ordered
yesterday.
that to bring with me, but it didn't arrive before I came into hospital. It's so good. I read a few bits of it.
Okay,
I
let's go.
I literally fell into teaching by accident because I was a weather forecaster and that's all I ever wanted to do. And when the people who were employing me as a TV weather forecaster decided they didn't want me anymore, firstly they broke my heart. And then I realized some years later they'd actually done me a massive favor because I went to the Met Office College where I got to teach forecasting, so that was kind of nice. And I discovered I quite like this, teaching other people stuff. And then randomly, I retrained as a maths teacher and somehow survived 2 years in a classroom aged 40 to 42. And then discovered a maritime academy where I was a round peg in a round hole. I was teaching maths and meteorology to students not much older than those I'd been teaching in school who actually really wanted to be there and could finally see the relevance of the maths. And I did that for nearly 13 years. And then I took redundancy for a number of reasons. Having done little bits of tutoring, a student or two a year, I thought, well, that's something I can do just to kind of keep the money ticking over. So it was, yeah, I'll do this for a bit. But I need to upskill. I don't know what teaching in a classroom looks like now because I've been out of a secondary classroom for so long. So I hunted down maths teachers on Twitter, stroke X, and I discovered LaSalle Education and Complete Mathematics, and I found Helen Osmond in an online maths conference, and I discovered Qualified Tutor. And then I discovered that I didn't know I needed to be supported until I was being supported. And I still needed to upskill in all sorts of areas, not just about my subject knowledge, but about relating one-to-one with students with differing needs, often complex needs. And I just kept feeling the need to upskill. Some of that happened organically through my interactions with lots of different young people. Some of it happened by talking to people who got more experience than I'd got. And then I trained as a coach because I realized that coaching was an integral part of what I was trying to do with my students. And I didn't feel equipped to do it to the level that I felt I was capable of. So I upskilled again. And I think this idea of being a professional tutor, well, I came up with a name for what I was doing without really calling it a business. But I think it's when I started focusing on the social media stuff and my brand and what I wanted to look like visually, and being involved with Emma's Make Your Marketing Count group and various other places, that I realized, okay. And my husband keep telling me, you have a business. I keep telling people about your business. I'm like, yeah. And I have to tell HMRC about stuff, so I guess I'm a business. So yeah, I'm a professional tutor. And I think the what sealed the deal was my mastery certification from Qualified Tutor. Because I earned that. It was an award that I'd earned by proving that I did stuff that meant I was at a level for a whole, I was safe, I was supported, and whatever the other one is.
Skilled.
That's the one.
Okay, so there's so much there. Have you got more gems to drop?
I think I'm done for now. Oh, she's frozen. She's back.
You're back.
And she's frozen again. This does happen sometimes quite a lot, Holly. Bear with us.
Glitchy day.
She will either the device has collapsed and she's now trying to log in on her phone. I'm assuming
Yes,
that
I'm just trying to hotspot so that doesn't happen again. Dee, I'm going to make you. Yeah, I can't come right now. You're live on LinkedIn in your pajamas. Hello, all of LinkedIn. Right. Okay. So let's keep going. Okay. So did you have any more gems to drop before I start unpacking?
Okay, now I'm done.
Okay, not yet. So firstly, that for me, the first thing that I wrote down was they broke my heart. And what a thing that is, that you were 16, you were 18, you were 21, you had a passion, and you pursued that passion and you were successful. You were on TV and you showed me the awesome videos of you pointing to the weather. And and honestly, you achieved that goal, but then the goal evolved because you said they broke my heart, but actually it turned out to be a really good thing. And you all of your things, it's what I talk about in the book in terms of find your element. So you were able to find a new element, a place to bring your whole self, where people really wanted you and wanted to pay you for your services. Odette and I were talking this morning about what does it mean to be a professional tutor? And we both feel that, quite simply, I'm not talking about professionalism, but that title of being a professional tutor, if you make most of the money that you make from tutoring, you're a professional tutor. After that, it's a question of how good you are at being a professional tutor, right? How professional you are at your, but let's start there as a starting point. So you pivoted. So I became a teacher, I survived the classroom and all of that. And you're coming across with that sense of haphazard, stumbled into, but there's always intention behind it. You looked on Twitter or whatever they call it now for somebody to be community with you, for your maths community. Yeah. And then you started making connections, and then the connections brought you new connections, and you got the support that you needed. But all of that is coming from your professional curiosity. Right. And I think that that's really, really interesting. The Mastery Award, just to clarify, Qualified Tutor wanted to create an answer to awards, because I don't believe that there is one best tutor, because it's all about the match between the tutor and the child. The best tutor for Michael is not the same best tutor as the best tutor for Benjamin, my son. So finding best is a different thing for different children. What I wanted to create was a model where we were able to evaluate how developed we were as tutors just by unpicking what our expertise are. And when you filled in that form and you were able to say, these are my qualifications, this is my CPD, this is the work that I do, you were able to elevate and actually prove to yourself that level of expertise. And mastery is, you know, people say to me, I spoke with a head teacher once who got an outstanding in her primary school, and she said, what you don't realize is outstanding is not the end. Outstanding is the beginning. You get to outstanding and you've got a whole new vista. And that's exactly what we've seen with you. So the journey through coaching, the journey through marketing, I think it's really interesting that something, you associated professionalism with your visuals, with how you come across. Right? I think that's really, really powerful. And it's all about the signals, isn't it? And it's the signals that then come through into the work that you actually do with actual students. So there's loads there, but I really want to hear from everyone before we start pulling threads. So Jenna, are you able to talk?
Yeah, apologies for background noise. I'm still in intensive care, and intensive care is a dramatic place.
We can't hear it, but we really, really appreciate that you wanted to be here.
One of the things I picked up on, two things so far, is Dee said that you felt like a professional tutor when you started focusing on. And Julia, you picked it up as an intention. And I think that as I was making some notes as to what my starting point was going to be, I was halfway through writing the sentence when I started focusing on when Dee said that. And then I was halfway through writing the word intention when you said that.
Isn't that interesting?
I think that we've had so many conversations about different aspects of tutoring, about all of the different things. And I think that the thread that it keeps coming back, and I think is one to pull on today, is that it's about that deliberateness, that intention, that active choice. And I think that that's the thing, is that when we make that choice to be intentional about our practice, and I think for me specifically, it went from being something I did out of curiosity and fun and because I wanted to help, and to go from that transition from volunteering to professional, it was that point when I was choosing to be better. And I think that idea of upskilling and that being a pivotal point, and that idea of seeking community, seeking learning, seeking balance, I think that comes into it, is that it goes, yes, it, like, there's an element of what's the word, not apprenticeship, but that kind of learning stage where you're seeking learning. But I think it's more than that. You're not being given the learning. It's not about figuring out how to do it. It's about figuring out you as a professional. I think that's the transition for me. And that's what I look for.
Sorry, say it again. I feel like you said something that I didn't quite capture. Say it again.
That transition from being given learning to seeking learning and seeking your identity as that professional. I think that's the point at which you transition to become a professional. And part of it is that, and this is what I look for when I'm looking to work with tutors, and it doesn't matter whether it's necessarily tutors or other practitioners, it's that point where, like, you see it with kids, right? It's part of development, all types of development that you go through, where you are being trained and then you feel like you know everything you need to know, you're now it, but then you go, hang on a minute, no, I don't know anything. And I think that that's the bit where you start coming into your own, and it's not that you are a professional, you are professional, that you are in developing your practice, your own identity as a tutor, your own identity as whatever practitioner. And I think that for me personally, that's happened in a few different stages, as it does for many people. And I think initially it was that I'm not just playing at this, I actually am making a difference, and I should be aware of what the difference is that I'm making to young people, and therefore be aware of my practice and be intentional and develop my practice. But then also in each phase of my career, in that I might have pivoted slightly into what I'm focusing on and why. And like Dee said, one of those transitions, and I think that's the thing with all of this, right? It's transitions, it's that transitional thinking and the transitional practice, marketing, and the way that you relay and relate yourself to others. I think that change, those transitions kind of form part of that identity of professional. And I think that's where we use terms like specialist and expert, or like, you know, these sorts of things to denote level of experience, is when you have these major transitional periods. So the first one is from learning and playing at, or like training at, or whatever, dabbling, to professional, and then moving on through those stages. I think that, yeah, there's so many different things there that could be pulled on even more, I think.
Well, I mean, it was delish. It was absolutely delish. Danielle is going to take Moxie for a walk now, so he probably won't wander in again.
You
Holly,
can take Kenzie with you.
that's a good idea. Holly, I hope that we've given you a sense of how we talk around here, and how honest and genuine and serious we try to be, with some lightheartedness. So go for it.
Yeah, I would say I probably don't feel that I am a professional yet. I think I'm on the journey to it. I think I'm at the beginning of it. I would say the transition was, I had my first lot of sort of student cohorts going through their GCSEs in my first year. And I feel that I kind of fed off the feedback that I got with that, because I felt that I kind of went at it statistically. I felt that if people aren't getting the results to me, I won't feel like I'm doing a good job, which probably is not necessarily always the case, but you feel like it when you're starting out. And I think the feedback and the results that a lot of my students got in that first year, I think gave me the confidence to think I could go on and develop into a professional. Because I think it was a lot of I didn't have much of the self-confidence because I was just a student. I just did English at A level, but I really enjoyed it, and I thought I could try and, you know, pass on knowledge at least. And then I think the switch came when I realized I wasn't just passing on knowledge. I think I was passing on support, but I was also passing on skills and more than knowledge. And I think each year I feel like I'm passing on more to my students than before. So I feel like that's where I feel like I'm starting to become maybe towards professional. Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. I think we all resonate with you used exams as your benchmark. I think we've been there as a primary tutor. I craved those, you know, we don't get that feedback in primary that you do as a GCSE tutor. We were all nodding with you when you said I wasn't just passing on knowledge anymore. Yeah. And that sense that knowledge is only the beginning, and that knowledge is a tool, and that knowledge plus skills is synergy and is individualization and all sorts of creativity and opportunities in life. And I think you get to a point eventually where there's no passing on, it's actually bringing forth. And I would be curious to see if that sort of becomes a shift in your language and approach. You know, when Dee talked about, I realized I was coaching and I needed more in the coaching skill set, you know, to build into my toolbox. That shift into a coaching mindset is actually the difference between teaching and tutoring. It's when you sit alongside them and you engender the learning rather than enforce the learning. So well done. That was an excellent start. And I think we're all beginning to hear the nuance in the thinking that is really that point that Jenna said about focusing. And I say this with parents as well. You're paying money, but are you paying attention? And paying attention to our tutoring is probably the bedrock of everything. Zara, you made it. Zara,
Yes, although
you've
only
been
briefly.
that's okay. So then let's grab our opportunity. The question is, what has your journey been towards identifying, and Jenna, you nailed it with that word, identity, identifying as a professional tutor?
My journey started about 20 years ago because I was tutoring my cousin's children, and I realized that she suggested that I took up tutoring, and so I did so. And so I have been tutoring for quite a while. I've tutored students from different. At that time, I was working in a lab doing research, and so because I found out I got along really well with that age group, secondary school age students, I decided to go for a PGCE. And so I'm teaching and tutoring. Now, the reason I'm in a hurry, I'd logged in here, because remember, the first thing I said to you was, where have you guys been all my life? Like it resonated very much with me when I watched a broadcast, another YouTube broadcast. And because I could have done with the support, especially over the past few years since the lockdown. However, so there was no question of my not joining. I mean, I joined immediately, as you remember. So I've tutored students just from all over the world, as well as I've tutored in students from maintained as well as private schools, because I registered with a tutoring agency that worked with local schools. And so I was able to go into students from those schools, into their homes, and tutor them there. And I've just tutored a broad range of people. And so I felt that I feel quite seasoned as a tutor.
Lovely word.
but the fact that something like qualified tutor existed was quite the finding of the year, I think.
I'm so glad. So I love the idea that you feel that your broad experience has caused you to be a seasoned tutor. And I'm going to push you now, and I'm going to stay with you, Zara, because I know that you've got limited time. My question to you is, and I put it in the chat just now, what were the moments? What were the difficult moments? We know in learning there are breakthrough moments, and sometimes it's a penny dropping, and sometimes it's such a difficult thing that we come out of it taller and wiser. What were those moments for you, Zara?
I think that because I had lots of difficult moments during my PGCE, with tutoring, I mean, tutoring just felt like a breeze. Because, so I had my difficult moments one-on-one, actually, when I pulled students out of class to discuss challenges they were having or that I was having dealing with the lesson. And so as a tutor, I didn't really have, because it was almost like I was a pseudo parent, but one that they could talk to, as opposed to, because teenagers, I mean, they'll do anything other than talk to their parents. And so I felt like I was working alongside parents as a kind of assistant parent, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a partnership.
Yeah. So no, I didn't have difficulties with that I can remember. Of course, I'm trying to figure out my route to this school that I'm going to right now. Like I've got to be there at 12. And so perhaps I'm not really, nothing is coming to mind.
I hear you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I know what you mean when you're only half your brain is here. So I totally get that. But I think that your point around almost being in loco parentis for that short amount of time. Or, as we know with teenagers, like you said, they'll talk to anybody but their parents. And so the role of the trusted adult is a really, really powerful one. And I'm sure if you had more time, you could give us examples of those relationships and the moments when you're like, my gosh, that was more than knowledge that we did there. Yeah. Holly, I'm borrowing that, more than knowledge. I think it's really, really profound. Jenna, I know you got some juicy ones for us. I want to know the difficult moments that left you feeling more seasoned.
So many.
I know. Jenna, Zara, just for context, Jenna puts herself in difficult positions. She goes right close.
Yeah. And a bit like you, Zara, I have been tutoring for a very long time. For me, it's about 18 years, professionally. And I think that one of the things that I have done that comes from a place of imposter syndrome a little bit, and feeling inadequate when I shouldn't, is I have had a very long journey to get to a position where I feel like the professional that I am, and that I charge like it, and that I don't do the kind of level of pro bono work that I did before out of feeling inadequate. And I mean, I think there are a handful that stand out to me, but I think one particular family I was working with really made me realize that I needed to change something fundamentally, because I am a professional and I was going to lose that status, as it were, for want of a better word, if I didn't do something to better, not portray it as such, but to hold myself to those things that the definition of professional, including the bit where it means I do it for money, and real money, not just like a bit of pocket money that covers my expenses. And I was working with this family of 4 children, ages 2.5, 3-ish, 10-ish, 13, 14, and a 16-year-old. So 4 children with a whole range. And I worked with this family largely full time for all 4 children. And it was a lot. And I learned so much, and we had such an amazing time, and there were some really difficult patches. But it was the fact that I was doing most of that for free, and most of that going above and beyond the scope of what it was supposed to have been at the start. And I didn't hold those professional boundaries as such, not in the same way that I should have, and not in the same way that one who considers themselves professional tends to. And I think that for me, when that situation went wrong, because I wasn't in there as a professional, I had to do a lot of big thinking, and it affects me to this day. And that was like 10 years ago now.
We definitely know those moments. We know those memories that affect us even today. And Jenna, it was really mega that you went somewhere difficult, even whilst you're in intensive care.
I'm so sorry.
Go
I'm
on.
going to step out.
You do what you've got to do. Yeah. Okay, very good. But she's probably still listening, and I'm going to follow up with what Jenna just said, because it leads back to what Zara said, which is that relationship between the tutor and the parent. And I had a feeling that that's where these difficult experiences were going to sit. Parents aren't professionals. Parents shout at their kids because they're their kids. Tutors don't shout at the kids. We can't, because they won't come back. We can't, because it's not professional. We can't, because it's not what we're paid for, right? Parents will drink a glass of wine whilst their kids watch TV. The tutor won't do that. there's something really interesting. You know, Jenna just described the 4 kids that she was looking after, and that's like my life. Yeah, I've got 5 kids ranging from 19 to 9. And when she went above and beyond, she was you know, there was a challenge of identity there, because you want to embed yourself in the family, you want to make a big difference, you want to feel like you've got the relationships exactly how they want to be, and yet I'm struggling here. Can you help me to unpick it, please, Dee? Something about that distinction between what the profession, I know, something like this. In a way, a professional is more trustworthy because of their boundaries. You know, you're less likely to need to go to a therapist because of your tutor than because of your parent. Go on, have a go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to step out
Go,
now.
Zara. Thanks
Okay,
so
take
much.
care.
Nice to meet you,
Bye.
Next week.
Zara.
Nice to meet you.
Bye, love. Bye.
Yeah, this idea of boundaries is an interesting one,
Really interesting.
because a lot of my students came through a tutoring business for quite a while. The balance is more to those who've come to me direct now. And I wanted to establish boundaries, and that was easy with the students who came to me directly, the parents who approached me directly. It was less easy with those that came through the business. And I didn't perhaps think deeply enough about the work that needed to be done to establish those boundaries in a way that would be helpful both to me and to those parents. Most of the students I have through the business now I've had for 2 or 3 years, and I have a WhatsApp with the parent and the student, and so those relationships are so established now. I don't even have to think about what's going on because we understand each other. But establishing my boundaries and what I was prepared to tolerate, for want of a better word. I've talked about this student before. She came through the business. She'd actually been passed on to me because her tutor had moved into another time zone, which didn't make it work. And it was also not a particularly convenient time for me. So, but she didn't say thank you. And it got to the point where it just didn't sit comfortably with me. She was a nice enough student, did what I asked. I found a way into her life that meant that we could establish some kind of rapport. But bottom line was, it was not filling my joy bucket, because of the boundaries, because of the time issue, and so I couldn't afford to drop the student particularly, but it was necessary, and it helped me grow in that professionalism of knowing my boundaries and the best way to stick with them, for want of a better word. Made me dig into what is my why, but what is it that isn't my why.
What are your edges?
Exactly.
Yeah. So no, you're here. We're not going any further, right? You cross the line. No, now those are my boundaries. And you've got plenty of space for students to bring all their stuff. You are immensely patient, but for you to have that edge is definitely a moment of professionalism. And we've often spoke about, I like this phrase, that you're not really saying yes unless you know you can say no. Yeah. And there's something about no that actually does elevate your yes. Holly.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I've had a couple of, very similar to what Dee and Jenna said, I've had a couple of boundary situations that have been quite hard to deal with because I'm still quite new to the whole thing. I did have one where it was a case of they essentially were telling me what to teach. So it was my thought process was, why am I here, kind of thing.
Good.
You know, they were telling me day by day exactly, this is what you spend in the first hour and the second hour. And it was and I realized that I tried to sort of place in some boundaries of, well, this is what we're going to do today, and try to enforce my way of teaching, and it didn't work. So unfortunately, I tried, but it had to be stopped, just because I just couldn't. I wasn't teaching them. I felt like I was using what they wanted. I felt.
And were the parents right? Or were they wrong? Or was it somewhere in between?
Not. It's somewhere in between. I think some of the things, honestly, they really were just telling me to teach what I already planned.
Which is
They
just really
kind of just
annoying.
wanted to have it as their idea.
Oh, okay.
But then I think other times I think it was not appropriate to teach that for their level. So I kind of decided it wasn't gonna work.
Yeah.
I haven't had a lot of instances like that, but I have had a couple. So
It's a really powerful moment. I talk about it in the book. In chapter 2, I talk about all the things you need to stop. Chapter 3, all the things you need to stop. And one is stop answering to parents. Exactly like you just said. If they're bringing you in, give you the space to do your job. And if you think about the pattern of private tutoring and that idea that, traditionally it was parents that drove the industry. Yeah. Who are you prepared to pay for? How much are you prepared to pay for it? What are you prepared to pay for? That's a thing that we must move past if we're able to be professionals, because you wouldn't tell your lawyer how to write a contract. You wouldn't tell a consultant how to diagnose your symptoms. In the same way, a tutor has to be confident and competent enough to be trusted by the parent. Do you know what, Dee? You said about plumbers. I often use the comparison of plumbers and dentists, because you never know what they're doing in there. Do you know what I mean? You just can't see, and you wouldn't know. So yes, in the same way, a tutor needs to be trusted as a professional. I'd love to dig deeper into that one, Holly. Jenna used the distinction before of being a professional and being professional. And the two things are very closely intertwined, but they're not the same thing. You could be an unprofessional professional, i.e. you make most of your money in tutoring, but you show up late, you're not prepared, you aren't polite, all of the things that we know. What signals could you have given that parent? I'm shifting into mentoring here, forgive me. What signals could you have given that parent that would have shifted the power balance so that they didn't behave to you like that?
I think that it actually slightly worked a little bit towards the middle of the teaching. So what I did is I started to actually, before the lesson, so sort of the day before or the morning before, I would actually put in the chat what I was going to teach before they had a chance to come in and say what they wanted me to teach. But because I explained it so clearly and I planned everything out, and I said, today we're going to do this and this and this. And I think because I explained everything in such depth, because I feel that would work, that actually made them back off a little bit. Because I think that they saw perhaps the way that I structured it, the way that I wrote it, and they may have started to have a little bit more confidence.
Nice.
In me. So I think that did slightly work for a little bit. So I think just sort of asserting your knowledge or showing that you understand what you're doing, but actually showing it to the parent and not just verbally saying it. I think that really helped in terms of signals.
I think also a day early is really clever. Not too long to ask you to go and replan it all, but long enough that they know that, you're on top of it. I wonder whether there could also be a question that you could ask those parents in terms of, is there anything that you particularly feel I should be covering? Is there anything that's come up this week? Or even asking the young person, if the young person's also in the chat, really, really lovely to ask the young person, is there, but with plenty of notice, is there anything that you would like me to make time for in our schedule? Is that something that you're used to doing?
Yeah, that makes sense. I would, with the student would be in the chat. So alongside the lesson plan, I would often ask them, have you, done this particular stuff at school this week? Is there any particular areas in English that you felt you struggled with a bit this week? Because we could assign some of the lesson to that, or I could plan the entirety of next lesson based on that. And I think when the student got involved, again, I think the parent maybe slightly backed off a little bit because they kind of saw that it was being dealt with, I think.
Awesome. So those are exactly the strategies that signal professionalism, right? And you're showing up with curiosity. I'm here for you. What is it that you need? But sitting behind your curiosity is all your expertise. Dee, what are your thoughts?
I've always I got fed up with planning stuff and then telling the student perhaps a day in advance what we're doing, and they turn up and they're, oh, we did this today and I can't do it. Can we do that instead? Or they don't, I've planned something, I haven't actually told them what, because yeah. So now in the WhatsApp chat, a few days, I have reminders on my phone, get an update from these students. And so I asked them 2 days in advance in the WhatsApp chat, give me a maths update. What challenges have you been facing? What tasks have you been doing? And they'll often come back and say, it's all, we're doing this, but it's all good. But I now know what they've done, so I can do some retrieval practice. And it turns out actually, no, they can't do it. but they can, but they can only half remember it. And they're used to me doing that now. And most I have 19 students. I don't want to have to chase all of them. I tell them I'd rather not have to chase you. Please tell me in advance. And some of them do now. Most of them don't. But it's and the parents. I've never had parents telling me what I should do. I've never had that. And the other reason I ask the students what they would like is because I'm now making them think about their own learning
Throughout the week.
Because if they, and this whole metacognition thing is so important, because if they're I still get frustrated with some of my students, and I say, so when I ask them to verbalize what they did, and they just give me we did fractions, and that's not a huge lot of help.
You've been doing it fractions every spring term since you were 9.
And when I ask them to expand on that, they aren't able to actually describe what the aim was of the lesson, which does worry me slightly. Has it not been explained to them what they were supposed to be doing, or have they just not taken it on board because that's not the kind of person they are, and they just kind of wander through stuff? That's the way they learn stuff. But to make them think about their learning, what have I done this week? What was difficult is going to help them, certainly approaching exams, because if they're not conscious of what's difficult, they're not going to know what to work on.
Okay, let's spend the last 10 minutes talking about self-regulation and metacognition. What's just happened in the conversation is that we've dropped from top level down into the actual doing, which is completely legitimate because that's what we do. Actually, hold on, this ties both things in together. So I've decided to start taking on students again. And that's partly because I just built this lovely office and I can't not share it with students. And it's partly because I wanted to go through the journey of doing the thing that we talk about all day. And I did that thinking for myself of, I know what things I've tutored in the past, primary and EAL and those things. What do I want to tutor now? What's my niche going to be? And Holly, this is a lot of the work that we do. And there's some resources sitting in the membership about going through and working out what your element is in tutoring. And for me, it's very much about, it's two things. It's firstly doing the things that aren't being done at school. And secondly, it's doing the things that give the most bang for their buck. And that's why I landed on study skills, which is what people understand as really self-regulation and metacognition, understanding how you learn and making the most out of it. So I'm working now on, and I've got my first student, and he's coming this evening, and we're having our second session, and I've just signed up with an agency as well, with Newman, because they're local and I really want to serve the local community. And I'm making choices, and I'm designing flyers, and I'm, beginning to put myself out there as a professional tutor again, it is a bit of a mind shift. On the one hand, I'm developing the postgrad in professional tutoring and doing the lecturing about it, but on the other hand, I'm thinking about actual students and what they actually need, and it's really stimulating. So when we talk about self-regulation and metacognition, you've just said you ping them in the middle of the week to ask them how their maths life is going. And that does a few things. It teaches them to think about their maths life, and it teaches them to articulate their thinking in maths. So let's ask Holly and Jenna, if you're able to come back, we'd love to hear from you. What things are you doing to help your student think about themselves as learners, in the same way that this conversation is helping you to think about yourself as a tutor? That's what I do, right? I help you to think about yourself as a tutor and to build your identity. What things are you doing to help your students think of themselves as learners?
I normally do lots of, I think, reflection on work is important. We do a lot of discussion based things. I think getting students to go over what they've written or go over what they've done in class, but almost they talk it back to me. So we'd go through pieces of essays or paragraphs or things like that, and I'd get them to, read out a section to me, but then afterwards, tell me, what do you think about it and the way that you wrote it? Because they can, when you come back to it a second time, you can think, oh, I've got better ideas the second time. So then they're thinking, oh, maybe I can develop this idea, or my learning slightly changed to, I want to write in this style. So I think I get a lot of discussion and reflection out of them. And I think that really gets them to think about how they learn in their learning style. And then also that improves their writing subsequently.
That's right. Now, when you talk about learning style, you're not talking about visual and auditory and all of
No,
that.
no.
We know that there's no evidence for that. That was a distraction that took us decades to wash out. There are actually, there's a conversation at the moment about 50 or so learning strategies that kids use at different, or that we all use at different levels. But I've not done much reading about that yet. The words that I picked up in what you just described there as were better and want. So your student came back to the writing and said, I can do it better, which means that they have a sense of what good looks like. Yeah. And I want to write it like this means that they have a sense of what their good looks like. And those are really, really strong skills. Tell me more about where your students have started from. Are they coasting, are they near the top? What are their prior attainments when you get them? Because those are really insightful moments.
I think a lot of it is with the GCSE spec, they know the stuff. So they know their papers, they know their Shakespeare, and they know what's going on. But it's actually the way that they write about it and the way that they write their answers could be so much better than what they've done previously. So improving the way they flow their sentences, improving their vocabulary, because they have the knowledge. I think a lot of my students aren't quite sure how to get it on paper in a way that gets the marks that they need to get. So a lot of it is that reflecting and realizing I want to write better because I know what I'm writing, but it's how I write it. And that's what they want to improve. And we normally go through things like that.
Well, that's gorgeous, isn't it? Because that iterative process, I don't know if you've seen in our module, Powerful Feedback, we use Austin's butterfly. And if you look up the YouTube video of Austin's butterfly, it's just the most gorgeous example of the power of feedback to create, to enable a year 6 child to produce work at the level of a 14-year-old easily or above. And simply, the key element is the teacher never gives up. The teacher's like, oh, I love what you've done here. can you correct this? Can you improve that? And the process is really interesting because the butterfly, which is what Austin's drawing, it gets worse before it gets better. And you must see that in the essay writing as well, right? Because they're focusing on introductions. So the conclusions or the main body of the text then drops. And eventually they've got all the plates spinning at the same time. Too many metaphors, sorry. And actually the whole thing then sort of, then you get to that point of mastery, don't you? But that journey to mastery is an iterative process and it can be painful. So since Jenna's still not ready for us, Jenna, I'm holding the last 3 minutes for you. She's ready. Hold on, I have to finish my question. How do you help them to get through the tricky bits when they're struggling because they just can't crack it, or they feel like their writing is dropped before it's improved? What messages are you giving them to say, keep going, you can do it?
Yeah, I think a main thing I've noticed with if they're in a sticky spot is confidence. I think 90% of it with my students has been confidence. I've had students that have started with, with their head down and barely talking, and 9 months, 10 months later, they're completely different, but also that's reflected in their writing. So I think, I try to show them if you have a bad exam or a bad essay, that's one out of the 25 that you'll end up doing over the year. And the overall graph is going to go like that. And I repeat to them every lesson, I've seen you improve every week. So I always focus on the positives because I think sometimes they probably get a lot of negatives from all sides. So I say, I've seen you improve. So you're going to have dips, but the overall trend will be upwards, but you just got to keep writing. And they always do improve.
So it's so trustworthy because you become their touch point.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you're their benchmark, you're their memory of what they can do. That's very wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Jenna, you got the last 3 minutes, and the question was, I've lost the question. Just give me the answer.
It's fine. I very explicitly teach reflective learning and metacognition. And for all ages, these are for my really little ones, my toddlers, all the way through to my teenagers and my young adults. I'm very explicit about teaching those skills and why. And I'm very explicit in how I portray what my role is. My role is for you to not need me anymore.
Like
and I will
wheels.
push you. Pardon?
Like training wheels.
Yes, exactly. And I hate that people always go back to Super Nanny. That's a personal gripe because Super Nanny is not very healthy. But it is that sort of thing, and that like Nanny McPhee thing. I prefer Nanny McPhee. Is that I will.
You know that in the original books of Nanny McPhee, she gets prettier as
exactly. I love
right?
that, and that's how my relationship with these young people is that often at the beginning it's really hard. They hate me. They really need me, and they don't want these things. And by the end of it, they love me and they don't want me to go, but they don't need me. And that's when I have to go, and that's so hard
because the wind changes, my darling.
Exactly. And I think that what you just said there, Holly, about you're teaching them that confidence, you're that consistent thing for them. That used to be me, and now I have found a way of translating that, because it's also about attachment for me. A lot of my young people have attachment challenges, and I think that we don't think about attachment explicitly enough in everything that we teach and all of the young people, because if you can form that attachment and transition that attachment from you and those relationships to you to something that they can take on and generalize and use throughout their life and always come back to in their life, I think that's the thing. And so I think that I no longer can remember the question either.
Summarize it for me. We've been talking about being a professional tutor. We've been talking about thresholds and challenges and experiences and relationships and power balances. And we came to this point of reflecting on reflection. But it's all really the same brain, isn't it?
I think that's it. Reflecting on reflection. These conversations that we have to have with our students. We have to involve our students in all aspects of this. What do they see? And it's also how you get those, what are they called? Testimonials from your young people. Have these conversations with them. What did they see of you what do they think it should be? What were they like? My first conversation with them is always, what are those stereotypes you have in your head? What is your picture in your head of what this might look like? And what do you like about it and what you don't like about it? And that's all ages, toddlers, as I say, all the way through to those young adults. And those are the same conversations I have with the parents.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. What we're communicating here is confidence, and what we're sharing is confidence, and what's sitting behind that confidence is all the work. And what a joy that we get to do it together. Thank you, Dee. Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Jenna. Thanks, Zara, for making it for a little bit. Thanks, everyone who was listening. All the best. Have a